If I can make you afraid of your own wanting, I can sell you obedience as holiness. That's the core trick of purity culture. Rename desire as dirt, then sell you bleach. Buddhism is constantly dragged into this scam, quoted out of context as if the Buddha founded a monastery of ghosts. Desire causes suffering, they say, and the congregation nods, ashamed of every surge of hunger, sex, art, ambition. But you've been lied to. The Dharma does not call desire evil. It calls craving, tanha, a trap, and distinguishes it from aimed intention, chanda, the wholesome wanting that powers learning, love, and liberation. The forbidden teaching is simple and dangerous. You don't kill desire, you calibrate it, you consecrate it, you steer it. Purity culture hears that and panics. Why? Because shame is a technology of control. Shame herds, shatters, and harvests. Shame tells you your body is a scandal, your hunger a crime, your joy a leash held by someone higher. It weaponizes the language of clean to create a market for absolution. Buddhism, when unmuted, burns that market down. The Buddha didn't preach numbness. He exposed mechanics, contact, feeling, craving, clinging, becoming. He taught how to interrupt the loop, not how to amputate the nerve. He allowed joy in meditation, piety, sukha, praised wholesome aspiration, and aimed the fiercest critique not at pleasure but at possession, the glue that turns momentary sweetness into a prison. Purity culture wants your obedience. The Dharma wants your freedom. One says, don't want. The other says, see wanting, know its weather, discern its object, and decide who you'll become when you touch it. This is the scandal. Unashamed wanting is harder to govern. A person who can feel desire without drowning or denying is unprofitable to empires of control, religious or secular. That's why this teaching gets buried under slogans. It threatens both the chastity police and the dopamine dealers. Tonight I'm going to desecrate the altar of shame, and yes, we will hurt some feelings on purpose. We will pull apart the counterfeit virtues that purity culture sells as enlightenment, and we will drag desire out of the dungeon into daylight where it belongs, not to worship it, to put it to work. If your spirituality makes you smaller, quieter, and easier to manage, it isn't spirituality, it's training for a cage. Purity culture isn't about holiness, it's about order, inheritance, image, hierarchy. It begins wherever bodies become property, who inherits land, whose bloodline is pure, whose sexuality threatens a throne. To stabilize power, you need predictable people. To get predictability, you teach that certain desires are unclean, certain pleasures are dangerous, and certain bodies are temptation itself. Then you crown a class of interpreters, priests, influencers, experts, who sell rules in exchange for submission. Every rule is for your good, every punishment is for your soul, and the most effective instrument isn't law, but internalized disgust. Buddhism was born into a world already humming with purity codes. What did the Buddha do? He didn't torch household life. He refused to canonize status. He created a monastic path as a specialization, not a caste ladder. He offered lay ethics that did not criminalize desire, refrain from harm, theft, sexual exploitation, false speech, intoxication. That's not body hate, that's harm hate. Yet later, under kingdoms and clerical bureaucracy, purity logic crept back in. Celibacy became superiority, women became distraction, and desire was flattened into a single suspicious blob. History is a slow fog creeping under doors. Modern purity culture shapeshifts. In conservative churches, it's abstinence and shame. In wellness capitalism, it's high vibe and clean living. Same script in a prettier font. Both sell a fantasy of spotless identity that can be achieved through products, protocols, and performance. Both confuse control with virtue. Both fear Eros because Eros unseats managers. It answers to heat and meaning, not spreadsheets. And both dislike Buddhist nuance because nuance is hard to monetize. Why does shame work so well? Because it sticks to the most intimate parts of you: hunger, pleasure, longing for touch, for recognition, for God. Shame isolates, and isolated people are easy to sell to and easy to rule. The forbidden Buddhist counterspell is contact plus clarity. Contact with your own sensations so you can't be bullied by slogans about filth. Clarity about consequences so you aren't duped by romantic rebellion either. You don't need purity to live well. You need discernment. You don't need to be stainless. You need to be responsible. So we'll name what craving actually is: a loop, not a demon, how aspiration works, and why purity fails the engineering test of human hearts. If your holiness depends on hating yourself, it will collapse in the first storm and take other people down with it while calling the wreckage lesson enough. The first noble truth isn't pleasure is evil, it's dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, arising where we demand from experience what it can't give. The second truth names the culprit, tanha, craving, thirst that insists, grasps, and tightens. But the texts also praise chanda, wholesome intention, zeal for the good, the wanting that drives right effort. The same scripture that warns against intoxication celebrates pati, rapture, and sukha, bliss, as legitimate meditative joys. So no, Buddhism doesn't flatten all wanting into sin, it divides the stream. Craving is sticky. It glues me to mine, promise to fantasy, and turns an object into a tyrant. Craving consumes without learning. Aspiration is aimed. It selects, practices, refines. Craving kidnaps attention. Aspiration disciplines it. Craving inflates self. Aspiration dissolves it into task. When the Buddha described sensual pleasures as a sword with honey on its edge, he wasn't criminalizing sweetness. He was warning you to see the blade. If you can't taste without slicing yourself and others, the problem isn't taste, it's grip. What about householders? The Buddha didn't require them to starve desire. He required ethics around it. No exploitation, no coercion, no betrayal. That's not prudery, that's care. He praised generosity, not ascetic hoarding of virtue, but joyful giving, a desire to share that heals craving's isolation. He taught jhana, where joy doesn't depend on objects, and compassion, where another's well-being becomes your own. None of this fits a purity poster. It's messy, adult, embodied. And monastic celibacy, it's a technology for a specific aim, not a moral ranking. It frees bandwidth for a certain kind of work, intense attention training, just as athletes restrict diets to win a race. Confusing a specialization with universal law is how purity culture colonizes Dharma. The scandal is that many lay people have been taught monastic rules as if they were the only Buddhist road, then flogged for failing to walk it. That isn't teaching, that's theft. Desire in the Dharma is like fire. In a hearth, it warms the house. In dry brush, it burns the village. Purity culture bans fire and calls the cold enlightenment. Hedonism floods gasoline and calls the blaze freedom. The path is neither. Build a hearth. Then we can talk about heat without theatre. Suppression feels like progress because the noise goes down. You avoid the bar, the person, the song, the whole city. For a week you're a saint. Then the spring recoils. The thing you walled off returns with interest, and now you carry secrecy too. This is how purity culture manufactures hypocrisy. It trains you to curate a public image and outsource private struggle to shame. You don't learn the mechanics of wanting, you learn the art of hiding. What happens in the body? Dissociation. You numb sensation so triggers can't find you until life does. You call the numbness peace, but your partner calls it absence. You call your avoidance non-attachment, but your friends call it unreliable. You memorize quotes because they are clean. You avoid people because they are not. Meanwhile, the shadow fattens, unlived hunger leaking as judgment, gossip, moral policing. You become a connoisseur of other people's fallenness to distract from your own. Buddhism diagnoses a different medicine, exposure with wisdom, not binging, not banning, seeing, naming sensations, mapping the loops, cue to craving to behavior to relief to crash, and dismantling the delusions attached to them. Crucially, it assigns responsibility without self-hatred. This is happening. This is how it works. This is what I feed. Shame interrupts learning. Clarity restarts it. Why does white knuckle fail? Because it treats desire as enemy, not energy. Energy needs channel, meaning, and rhythm. Without channel, it splashes. Without meaning, it seeks novelty for its own sake. Without rhythm, it burns out. Purity offers none of these. It offers no. No can be necessary at the edge of harm. It is not a life, a civilization of no breed's secret, yes, inexpensive costumes. Your average scandal isn't a surprise. It's the bill for years of theatrical restraint. The forbidden Buddhist claim is tender and fierce. You are not dirty for wanting. You are responsible for what your wanting does to others, and you are free to apprentice your wanting to aims that don't humiliate you. If your doctrine cannot hold that sentence without twitching, your doctrine is a cage pretending to be a halo. If purity culture sells bleach, the algorithm sells sugar. Both need you off balance. Both flatter you with belonging, pure, high vibe, alpha, queen, and then invoice you with subscriptions. The no-fap prophet and the soft life oracle are often just sales reps for identity packages. They convert desire into content, cycles of hype, relapse, confession, redemption arcs, lucrative for them, bankrupting for you. Even Buddhist brands do this, sanctified detoxes, mystical cleanses, tantra-light miracle funnels. The product is the feeling of transformation, not transformation. Watch the metrics. They spike when you're aroused, sexually, politically, spiritually. Outrage and lust are high retention states. Platforms learn your triggers and choreograph your day. Soon, your desire isn't yours. It's a schedule written by code. Purity culture and the dopamine economy are enemies in public, allies in profit. One shames you into abstaining, the other baits you into binging. Both keep you away from agency. Buddhism's forbidden middle is boring to markets, slow discernment. It doesn't photograph well, it won't trend, it makes terrible reels, but it returns ownership of your gaze, your breath, your calendar, your bed. It refuses spectacle of sin or of salvation, which is why it gets smothered by louder myths. The quiet truth doesn't sell, it saves. So here's the blood oath purity and platform's fear. You will not buy an identity to manage your desire. You will not let shame or brand scripts tell you who you are when you're hungry. You will not call relapse destiny or victory sainthood. You will study your loops, refuse their choreography, and decide what your body, your love, your art, your God are for. The price is glamour, the prize is a life. The 12 links are not a mystical chain to memorize for exams. They're a debugger for craving. Ignorance, not seeing causes, starts the loop. Formations, habits, prime the system. Consciousness aims attention. Name and form builds a self around it. 6 sense bases touch the world. Contact hits. Feeling blooms. Pleasant, neutral, painful. Then comes the fork. Craving reaches, clinging sticks, becoming narrows, birth to a fresh identity. I am the kind of person who, and then aging and death of that identity with dukkha confetti. Where does purity culture aim? At feeling. It tries to outlaw pleasantness, unclean, and frighten you from contact. Where does hedonism aim? Nowhere. It rides the slide. Where does Buddhism aim? At clear seeing between feeling and craving. Feel the pleasant, fully, without contract. Watch the urge to grab. Call it by its field name. Notice the story that arrives to justify the grab. Do not argue with the story. Watch it walk past. If you grab, study that too, without theatre. Learn the conditions. Adjust the upstream. This is not sexy. It is sovereign. Apply it to sexual desire, to food, to status. Feeling isn't the problem. Ignorance about feeling is. Craving isn't a demon. It's a strategy your system adopted for relief. When you expose the strategy and offer a better one, craving has fewer jobs. Purity offers brute unemployment. The algorithm offers promotion. The path offers retraining. The scandalous line, enlightened beings are not desireless mannequins. They are free in the presence of desire, free to feel it, free to let it pass, free to aim it toward vows that don't inflate the self. Think Bodhisattva, the great desire to end suffering, swallowing lesser cravings without contempt. That desire is not a mistake, it's the engine. The forbidden part is that you're allowed to want big if your bigness makes others more free. There's a current older than your slogans. Eros, the heat that moves life toward life. Purity culture tries to dam it. Nihilism mocks it. The Dharma tunes it. In some Buddhist strands, devotion isn't infantile. It's Eros with an object worthy of you. In Mahayana, bodhicitta is literally the mind of awakening that longs for all beings to be free, a desire so large it burns out petty hungers the way the sun bleaches candlelight. In tantric frames, when not abused, the scandal isn't sex, it's transformation, heat turned into clarity, grasping turned into giving, ecstasy turned into emptiness that can love without a leash. But here's the adult clause. None of this licenses harm. The line between sacred eros and spiritualized predation is drawn in blood across history. If your practice confuses consent, breaches vows, or leaves people smaller, you are not working with Eros. You are feeding craving with incense. The forbidden teaching refuses both extremes. No sanctified numbness, no sanctified exploitation. Desire is neither a god to worship nor a bug to debug. It's power. Power needs orientation. Orientation demands truth. What is the desire that ends desire, not zero, right aim? When wanting aims at what cannot be hoarded, wisdom, generosity, liberation, its own fever drops. You stop clutching because the thing you want multiplies when shared. That's why kings fear it and markets can't price it. A person drunk on that kind of wanting is hard to govern and impossible to buy. If this sounds too grand, good. You've been living on diet soda versions of Eros, scroll lust, image lust, status lust. Consider the real drink. It won't make you pure. It will make you dangerous to anyone who profits from your smallness. If your religion taught you to fear your body, return the religion and keep the body. If your wellness scene taught you to worship your appetites, return the scene and keep the steering wheel. The forbidden Buddhist teaching on desire is not pious enough for churches and not reckless enough for algorithms. Want clearly, aim cleanly, own consequences. Shame is lazy morality. Purity is outsourced ethics. Hedonism is outsourced meaning. The path is adult. You stand inside your wanting without lying about it. You trace the loops without hating yourself, and you choose an allegiance larger than your next hit. What dies if you live this way? The market that sells you halos and hangovers, the identity that needed to be spotless, the romance with disappearing. What survives? Heat with direction, joy without theatre, vows instead of vibes, a body you can trust because you told it the truth and gave it a job worthy of its power. Don't ask me for permission to want. Ask whether your wanting liberates or locks the people it touches, including you. Ask whether your no is fear or wisdom. Ask whether your yes is generosity or costume. Then stop asking and become the answer repeatedly until the loop changes. That's not a slogan. It's a life. I'm silent flame. They call these teachings forbidden because they don't leave a role for the middlemen. Good. Fire the middlemen. Keep your hunger. Feed it to a vow. If that vow makes you more honest, more available, and less easy to manipulate, you've found the only purity that deserves the name. Not stainlessness, but integrity, the kind no one can sell you and no one can take. Drop your comment. Who taught you to be afraid of your own heat? And what are you going to light with it now?